first one. Thank you, thank you. So I don't, I need to click the table, so I hope I don't cover the screen, right? So welcome, my name is Saúl García, and I will talk about the Lightning Network. I have a little intro about it, and so basically a second layer solution of the Bitcoin network. So this is the agenda. I won't go into reading exactly what I'm going to talk about, but the main idea, what I want you to take away from here, is to understand the first to get to know that there's a Lightning network, that it exists on top of the Bitcoin network, and why is it useful, why is it good for, and why does the Bitcoin network has the need to have a second layer. So just as an example, right? Imagine a world where all uh, the financial economy was permissionless. That there's a, independent of your location, you can travel around and you can pay anyone else, interact with some value without having to worry about a different currency or if the country you're at is sanctioned, if they use MasterCard here or Visa or American Express. So imagine it was just free to transact with each other and there's nothing else that matters. So this will be a perfect example if we kind of think about Malmo, where you have to arrive here and you have to pay with Swish. If you don't, if you, many of us, I guess, we are foreigners, and if you don't have a personal number, you cannot have Swish. If you have Swish, you cannot pay with friends. So these kind of things could be solved with technology, with Bitcoin. So just to begin with, I mean, the main topic is the Lightning Network, but we have to understand what Bitcoin is, and I will assume that everyone has a notion about it, but I will start with a little recap. So Bitcoin, as the white paper says, is a peer-to-peer version of cash, which allows one party to pay to another one without the need of an intermediary. It's basically digital money. So this is important because if we want to transact between each other with no person in between, there has something that will allow that will require us to trust, right? And this is why Bitcoin is important to be decentralized, right? So how does it work? So we know that it's a blockchain, and the way the blockchain works is in every block there are some transactions that are issued, and it's just recording on a kind of chain all the transactions throughout history. So if I want to transact, basically I will try to post a transaction, and it will go into a new block, and it will be issued. In the Bitcoin network, these transactions happen every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, there's an algorithm that regulates the difficulty so that it stays like this, and every 10 minutes, you will have a new block. But who are involved, and how does this happen, right? There's three things that I think it's important to get from here. There's miners, there's blocks, and there are nodes. And all of them have significant importance because the miners, they will battle with energy, they will use resources to be able to compute some, let's just call it math, to get a new number, to solve a problem, to be able to say, hey, I have the entitlement of producing this block, and I will put all of these transactions, and I will get all of the fees from these transactions, and at the same time, claim the subsidy of the block, or the reward, as people call it. And this subsidy is in the rules of the blockchain that it's been 50 and then 25, but let's not go there. But basically, they claim a reward from the block and from all the transactions. But for this, the nodes have to agree. The nodes have to decide, like, hey, this is according to the rules or not, which is important for the decentralization. So in Bitcoin, the main thing is that the nodes have to be unexpensive, that every person could be able to set up a little computer and run a node, and in this way, we can process the transactions and validate and say, hey, you know, these miners are doing a good work, and if they don't do it, basically their energy will just go to waste because no one will care about this block, and they will say, no, this didn't follow the rules, they are trying to change it, we won't believe this. So all the incentives align into this, and the only way that we can keep it like this, decentralized, is if the blocks are not super big, which is a challenge because it makes it slower, some people will say. So this is how it works, right? The miner gets the transactions, puts them together, send them to the block, and then they could issue the transaction if the nodes agree. But of course, decentralization comes with a price, right? If there's a limited space and the price starts to go up, people will start to be wanting to be part of this economy and buying Bitcoin, transacting Bitcoin, storing it in their wallets, taking out from the exchange, or trying to do anything they can with it. And this, of course, a spike in demand will mean that has its challenge with the blocks, because it's not only the Bitcoins, as many of us have heard before, that there's like only 21 million Bitcoins that are scarce. It's not only the Bitcoins that are scarce, it's also the blocks. So if the space of the blocks gets congested, obviously the price of the fee will go up. I mean, it's not necessarily that the price goes up, but if you pay a small fee, the miners won't pick it up. So you will have to wait forever. So it means that the confirmation time goes up, as well as the transaction price per transaction, right? So when we want to scale it up, if we want Bitcoin to be part of a digital economy for everyone, the challenge is that we have to be able to scale it, but without undermining decentralization. So how do we do this, right? Just to put a benchmark and realize what we're talking about, we will see that Bitcoin, as of today, it could change, right? If I say something wrong, you can raise your hand or call me out, but it transacts around 7 transactions per second, compared to Visa and MasterCard, which is 24,000 to 40,000 transactions per second. But with the Lightning Network, we could achieve, this is a theoretical number, but up to 1 million transactions per second. There's a caveat here because, I mean, Bitcoin, when you transact from point A to point B, that value is settled. When you transact with Visa and MasterCard, that value is not settled. They are basically providing a service to transact your dollars. And to understand this, we have to compare basically how our current system works compared to the Bitcoin system, right? So as we have just talked about, if the challenge is scalability, what we want is instant transactions, and we want low fees. And as I am trying to propose in this talk, Lightning fixes this, right? So our current monetary system, as I just explained, as I just told you, I will explain that it has also the problem of scalability, right? Or dollars, let's say we can see that the base layer will be the central banks. So if the central banks have dollars, euros, kronors, it doesn't mean that we are using the central bank to transact, right? That will be like basically the Bitcoin network. So on top of that, we have the banks, which operate with different. I see smiles around there. So they operate with the different banks, Handelsbanken and SEB, and then they provide a service to the users, right? On top of them, we have Visa, MasterCard, Switch. So there is a layer that provides this scalability, and people want to compare Visa and MasterCard with the Bitcoin protocol, with the Bitcoin network. And just as this is partly because of my beliefs, I mean, we see that Visa, MasterCard, Switch, they are protocols, and they are trying to make it scalable. It doesn't mean that they create their own new currency. They just use their technology on top of an underlying asset, which in theory has value, like the US, the euro, and the kroner, to be able to scale it up. So this is the same thing that we are attempting here in Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is the base layer, it's a blockchain, and on top of it, there's a Lightning Network. Could there be other solutions? Yes, as there's Visa, there's MasterCard, Swish, and other different ones, clearly. But the beautiful thing is that the Lightning Network is basically getting all the good properties of Bitcoin and allowing it to keep it decentralized. So what is the Lightning Network? Let's start there, right? This definition is from Wikipedia. It's basically a layer 2 payment protocol which allows any cryptocurrency that is a blockchain based. It could also be a different one, like it could be Bitcoin, Litecoin, or other similar technology to be able to transact between different nodes at a fast pace. So basically, it will just be a protocol on top of a protocol, right? And the idea is that it features peer-to-peer system for making micropayments of cryptocurrency through a network of bidirectional payment channels without delegating the custody of funds. It sounds super hard, but don't worry. This is just the definition of what it is, and I will explain with detail how to think about it. So as it said on the definition, the Lightning Network is basically, it works basically by opening channels from point A to point B, two parties. Now let's imagine Alice wants to go to the coffee shop and buy some coffee, right? Of course, if she wants to pay with Bitcoin, every transaction will cost, and it will be paying 50 cents or 10 cents or $1, depending on the blockchain demand in that moment. And it will be an overkill to make a transaction and use that block space for just buying a coffee. So what we do right now is Alice goes to the coffee shop. Instead of paying each coffee, which demands work, and there's a queue and everything, she just opens a tab. And at the end of the tab, everything is settled. The barman just, if Alice walks out, the barman just closes the tab and gets the payment, right? Or Alice can just go and ask for it to just close the tab. So this is basically an example of how Lightning works. It's almost the same thing. So the payment channel is basically a 2 out of 2 multi-sig transaction. I don't know how familiar people are of this, but Bitcoin as a protocol allows you to make transactions, but it also allows you to make multi-signature ones. So it means that you can make 2 of 2 or 2 out of 3 or many more people saying like, hey, if you want to have these funds transact or move, you have to gather some signatures from different entities, which could allow for protection, right, for custody. But in this case, it's being used for scaling up. So they create a 2 out of 2 transaction, and basically Alice will put the funds, they will go into this multi-signature address, and both parties will sign it up. In this case, I put here like six coins there. If each coin will be like 100,000, so basically Alice will get, the contract will say, now there is 600,000 sats in this contract, and they are sitting on Alice's side. So Alice will get 600,000 sats. It doesn't mean that she spent the funds. She just opened a transaction with another party, in this case the coffee shop, which will allow her to move the funds back and forth in a posterior time. So once this transaction is signed, this one goes to the blockchain. And we can see in this little animation that the transaction is signed in the blockchain. This is what the miners will take as a transaction and record it. So in this case, even though she's not spending the money, as of yet, she's paying for the transaction to be validated by the blockchain, right? But this comes with a benefit, right? If we digest it, if we clarify about the Lightning Network, there are three different kinds of states, let's say, of transactions that happen here. What we just saw is a funding transaction. So Alice just funded a transaction, a channel, to open in the Lightning Network. But then there's commitment transactions, which these ones do not happen on the on the blockchain, but on the Lightning Network. And ultimately, there's a closing transaction, which is the settlement when they decide to close this channel. So as they signed, this contract goes to both parties. And in this case, we will just imagine both of them are nodes. We don't have to think about the detail right now, but they are both an entity participating in the Lightning Network. And as they start, there's a channel with 600,000 sats on Ali's side. As we said in the definition, these channels are bidirectional. But in this case, it just started. It only goes one way. The channel has a capacity of the transaction size, which in this case is 600,000, and it means that it can only transact this amount of money. And in this case, it's all on Ali's side. But let's say that Alice decides to buy a coffee, a really expensive one in this case, and it will cost her 200,000 sats. She will send 200,000 sats to the coffee shop, and basically this will create a commitment transaction, which will update on both sides of not on the blockchain, on their nodes, on their channel. They will just have an update that says, hey, Alice just sent 200 to the coffee shop, so now the balance is like this. And it's signed. And the other state basically falls behind. If it was a contract, we can break it down, right? But it's not really a physical contract, so they are just like information of states getting stored on each node. If Alice decides to buy a second one, then she makes another payment, and of course, I mean, now this payment channel, even after the first purchase, it becomes bidirectional. The coffee shop could decide to send money back to Alice if the coffee shop wanted to buy something from her, or if they both are part of a bigger network, right? Because what happens when there's more people? So the Lightning infrastructure basically takes advantage of this. It allows to build to use the connections pre-built from different parties to be able to hop through them and arrive to new parties. In this case now, I mean, we have the same example where Alice is connected to the coffee shop, and someone else connected to the coffee shop, in this case Bob, and Bob and Neve are also connected. So there's a channel between all of them. And I'll just put this little image as a representation of how, so we will see that each part of this is a channel, an independent one. And in this case, this channel has six coins of capacity, and there's 2 on this side and 4 on this side. There's 6 here, 2 on Bob, 4 on the other side of Bob, and 4 on Eve. So basically, there's a limit of how much people can spend, which maybe people will wonder if this is a challenge of the Lightning Network infrastructure, and clearly it is. But how it's solved is when more people join the network and the value of it goes up. Then it means that they are able to send more value in currency. And in this case, if Alice wanted to send money to Eve, what will happen will be, if we think about how it works, Eve will issue an invoice to Alice for, let's say, 200,000 sats. And Alice will basically use her phone, scan it, and what will happen is that the funds will have to find a path from all of her connections. Right now we're just seeing one image of it, and it will have to in this case, hop 1, 2, 3 times to arrive to Eve. And what will happen, it will be, it sends to the coffee shop sends to Bob, and Bob sends to Eve. Every person on the network, on the node, who was going through this, basically their state changed. So they are providing liquidity for the network, and in this case, one could think about them being like miners, right? They will charge for this because they have a device running in their houses that is providing a service for the whole network. But the difference is that the fees are super small. One could think that it's like a 0.001% of the transaction. It will be, let's say you pay below 1 cent to buy a coffee. But this, of course, depends of how well connected is the network, right? The more people are in the network, then the people will attempt to lower their transaction fees, their routing fees, in order to be able to provide the service for other people to transact, right? So we can see that this structure is not basically like a blockchain itself, right? It doesn't work if there's no people. You need to have a lot of people for it to scale. And of course, there has to be an incentive for people of doing this, right? And the incentive of the people like me or like other friends here, is to be able to support this network, which we believe there's a benefit for society, right? We put our little nodes, we fund them, we provide liquidity for people for little to no cost. And there's a question here. Yes, in this case, right? Of course, I didn't want to get into these details. Maybe later we can answer questions, but in this case, we can say they are a node. And normally, I mean, if they're providing liquidity, they will be on 24/7. But there is the case where people could have a node which is not routing. So what they do is basically they connect. I see the coffee shop has a lot of liquidity. Then I connect to the coffee shop on my little Bitcoin wallet, Lightning wallet, and every time I want to spend, I know I can go through the coffee shop, and the coffee shop will charge me the amount of fees that he decides. And this is where the trade-off comes into play, because if you want to make small transactions, you can get little to no fees. But if you want to send, I don't know, $1 million, then if it's going to scale on a percentage base, it's better to use the Bitcoin network. So you're not going to transact on a massive scale in the Lightning network. You will basically use the Bitcoin protocol. So as I just said, the more the merrier, right? And if the network it's like this, of course you'll see that there's Alice, Bob, Eve, there's coffee, the coffee shop. It could be the Visa network, the MasterCard network, Swish network. Anyone could decide. Is permissionless. Anyone can decide to just spin up a node, put some funds in there, connect to multiple parties, and provide liquidity for little to no cost, right? You just have to pay the electricity, which nowadays is super expensive, right? But yeah, so the more the merrier. The potential. This is the part where I wanted to put a bit more of emphasis, because sometimes it's hard to imagine where this could lead. But once things start to develop, it could like spark our minds and say, wow, I didn't know this was happening already, because this is basically, even though I said the potential is what's happening right now, right? The potential is to being able to interoperate with the current financial system. How is this happening right now? There's a company called Dstrike. See it as Swish, right? They were the pioneers into basically integrating Lightning into the financial network. They are a peer-to-peer payment protocol in dollars. It's in the United States, and what's happening is like people can just send dollars between each other, right? Because it's like Swish, the same thing, same concept. But they decided to interact with the Bitcoin protocol, which means if Alice wants to send money to Bob, but Bob only wants to accept Bitcoin, then Bob can issue an invoice with a QR code, just as the ones that we can also issue on Swish. And Alice doesn't need to know. She will just say, okay, I send you $1, if that was the amount, right? But just imagine it is. And what Strike will do is basically take money from Alice, buy Bitcoin with it, and send it to Bob. And Alice didn't know. She just thinks she sent some dollars to Bob. And Bob, of course, doesn't know what was the app Alice used. For all that he know, she could have been using a Bitcoin Lightning wallet or anything else that interoperates with it. So this company, Strike, is attempting what many are now, which is basically to connect the world. How are they doing this? So when Strike happened, it allowed a couple of 100,000 users in the US to transact and interoperate between each other, and a couple of millions that exist in the Bitcoin network. And then people starting to see this. They find out about a project in El Salvador that was basically just running out of a Bitcoin economy. And El Salvador made Bitcoin a legal tender. So they provided a wallet for every person in society without having the need to have a bank, where they could have either Bitcoin or dollars. And what started to happen was that people from the States could send money to their families in El Salvador just by paying 1 cent of fee. They send $50 to their grandma or their sister or brother who are living there, and the grandma or brother and sister, instead of having to go to Western Union an hour or two of a bus and having to pay $5 out of, or 10% out of the total amount, they pay nothing. It's for free. And so Strike opened up their operations in El Salvador and also made some competition, right? Like, it started to become a broader economy. Everyone can interact between each other. Even though Strike is not the same as the Chivo wallet, they can either send Bitcoin between each other directly, or they could just send dollars, and that will happen that they go through Bitcoin and they convert back to dollars in El Salvador. And then someone in Nigeria did the same thing, because apparently these guys from Strike were super nice and released their API, and they decided, like, this is the way you do it. I mean, you just take money from your customers, you connect your Lightning networks with the different exchanges, and you can sell at instant time and send it back to the bank accounts where your users have yeah, I mean, like Swish, right? If you have it with Handelsbanken or SEB, I mean, you will receive it in your bank account. Same thing. Now Nigeria can interoperate with the US and El Salvador, and they didn't need to do anything. They just had to plug into the Bitcoin network. Cash App in the States, which is another Swish kind of version, did the same thing, and now people from Cash App can interoperate with Strike, even though they are different networks. Strike opened operations also in Argentina, and now people in Argentina can receive Bitcoin from anywhere in the world, and making this network more robust. More people making the Lightning Network, filling it with nodes, with capacity, in order for people to transact from point A to B without needing any intermediary. And this comes to a really interesting memory that when this group of Cryptonite started, and I remember someone mentioned that payments in Lightning usually didn't go through, and this was basically 6 months ago. And at that time was also not happening, this that didn't go through. If you think about it, 1 year ago, maybe it was the case, but the people get this memory and they don't realize that the network is expanding, growing bigger and bigger, and nowadays it's you transact in a millisecond, and I haven't had this problem of not being able to find a route, because basically what is going under the hood is your payment is trying to find how to get to point B through some hubs of different entities, right? And now we have Swish, right? We all are wondering, when will this happen? Will they join the Bitcoin network? That would be beautiful, because then, without having to use Bitcoin, now I can just travel to the US, and if people just receive Strike, I can send money to friends as well. I can just pay in the local bar, pay in this place, and I don't have to have the problem of, oh, I don't accept American Express because it's super expensive, the fees that they charge. Or the other guys who don't accept credit card because they charge them 3% per transaction. Where here they could basically get charged 0.1% of per transaction, which is probably pretty expensive for some people. But anyway, part of this, yes, right.
Question is, you also see a lot of articles that MasterCard and Visa is trying to connect to the Bitcoin and they're trying to do some cooperation. Is this also through the Lightning Network, or do you have an idea?
So I'm not sure. I do follow the news, and I know that they have announced that they will try to interoperate with the Bitcoin network. I assume that they are intending to interoperate with the Lightning network, but the official message, I am not aware. As far as I know, is they only said Bitcoin. They didn't say Lightning, and I don't know how it works. I mean, I know PayPal does, and basically people could have their account with Bitcoin in PayPal. And of course, I mean, basically what Lightning is doing is allowing this way of scaling up without having to be part of one central entity. Because some of us could ask ourselves like, yeah, but I mean, we can all make an account in PayPal, and then I mean, we can send Bitcoin between each other inside of PayPal. Yeah, but they have it. So if something happens to PayPal, they get hacked, or I don't know, or they just decide to be nefarious and go away with money, then we don't have it, right? So there is this push of trying to adopt it, because as far as I know, when Visa and Mastercard have these transactions from let's say Mexico to the States, I'm from Mexico, I guess, but from Sweden to the States, or from Sweden to Mexico, it doesn't go directly, right? There's intermediaries that have to move the money, and their minimum fee it's way above 1%. I don't know the exact number, but I have heard some talks, and it's basically way above the Bitcoin network possibility, right? So if they see that there is this competition coming up, the best thing they can do is just join, and they remain with their customers, and they interoperate with everyone else without getting out of the system. I don't think that that Bitcoin is going to replace all currencies from day one to day two, right? I mean, we will probably use or each our own currencies for a long time, uh, but since it's a really very liquid asset, it's easy to buy and sell everywhere in the world. So the possibility for anyone to get inside and buy and sell is just creating more volume, more demand for the asset, and a benefit for everyone. Yeah. Any other question?
So just to expand on that, talking about adoption of payment processes like Swish, for example, and adoption on something like the Lightning Network, using Lightning Network. And correct me if I'm wrong, because Lightning is first and foremost predicated on making Bitcoin transactions faster. So is that a fair statement to make?
So, I mean, I cannot speak about the intention of the people who
Sure.
built it, right? But I mean, this is clearly an advantage of it.
Yeah.
But I also know that there is different kind of projects which are coming out, and people are making VPNs out of the Lightning Network, because at the end of the day, what the Lightning Network, what Bitcoin is, and also the Lightning Network is a message protocol. So you can send messages from point A to point B. You don't really need to send value, but you can.
So what I'm trying to get at is, why wouldn't someone like Swish or why wouldn't someone like MasterCard want to use Lightning Network and Bitcoin as the base transacting currency to do this with? I mean, in your opinion, because I mean, I have certain ideas. I can imagine that it's also a competitor. So you said something which is the best thing that they could do is probably just adopt it. And I think right now I would agree. By the way, for more than just philosophical reasons, technical reasons as well. But I kind of think that we're in a situation where we get these ideas where they allude to the fact that yes, we're going to adopt Bitcoin, and yes, Lightning allows this fast transactions.
Yeah.
In my opinion, and I'd be interested in yours because mine's is not very informed. But in my opinion, I kind of think like one of the reasons that they're not doing this, but they're not necessarily, they haven't thrown their hat in the ring, and they're not necessarily taking it off. And I'm just wondering like how much of that is political, how much of that is simply business related. I don't know. A bit of a
Yeah. So, of course, I am not an expert in the political side of the situation, but what it comes to my mind is that, you know, Visa interoperates with different banks, and there is protocols established. There was someone here who was working with these kind of protocols, who might be here or not and know more than me. But I just imagine if they are operating with different banks, and if those banks do not adopt the Lightning Network, then they cannot communicate, right? So they will need to basically see, okay, how is this developing? Is it now big enough? Is it worth it? I mean, maybe now they see that we cannot compete. Let's also step in and join it. But then they can only use this wherever people have also the interoperability, right? But if other banks don't, I mean, they will continue using their old ways. Yeah, that's my opinion, what I think.
Because I work with financial systems, I have done that since 2004. So it depends on if you talk about like mobile pay or nets, they are working with this in the Nordic. They are competing with Google Pay to begin with, like the payment system. And if Google Pay is coming to this market, then they will take the whole market from the Nordics, like the Amazon will do in the future with the supermarkets and etc. This is the first one. The second one is this one. You should be more specific when you talk about, is it government entities or we talk about like El Salvador, Chivo is made as a government entity. But the others, I don't know if they are more private or
No, they are private. So only Chivo is government.
Yeah, so that's why you have to distinguish between the government and the other one. Because if you go through the government and you make a financial system, then you need to do it through a tendering. So yeah, so you cannot just apply any system, and you cannot choose a system, an existing system. So this is another story as a government. So it should be divided for private sector and the government, because it's more complicated. Even if you implement the Dstrike, for instance, you cannot say in the tender that we need to buy Dstrike. It's not allowed. You just describe the system, how it works, and then you choose a system.
Yeah. So the way, for example, the Dstrike works, there's a challenge there in Argentina because they don't have. So Argentina also uses the dollar as part of like a side currency, right? But they have their local currency, and so the advantage of Dstrike in El Salvador was that they had already implemented this governmental decision of making Bitcoin legal tender, so they could also connect with the local banks. So they had like this kind of switch, but it also operates with Bitcoin. In Argentina, they don't have this, so they are basically using like a US dollar stable coin, which is in cryptocurrency, but then at least they put on some ATMs where people could basically go and withdraw this let's say Bitcoin into US dollars, or these crypto US dollars into physical US dollars, right? But I think this is like the advantage of all of this is just like the bigger the network gets, then the network effect just becomes bigger and bigger, and the more robust it is.
So to that point, the bigger the network,
Hmm.
the more people that are involved, the cheaper are transactions and borderless transactions
Yes.
in a non-custodial way. So like literally, I don't have to have my money in a bank.
Exactly.
Right.
So
That to me seems like a really good thing.
I have two examples that we can see here, and one was donating to El Salvador, right? So I personally followed Twitter, and then I saw that someone was uh, asking for. They posted a QR code, and they said, "Hey, I mean, there's this guy Mario, a business owner, and I mean, he had like a little cart selling, I think, ice cream, and they posted his QR code, and he received over $1,000 in just like 2 hours, 3 hours of people just on Twitter who said like, ah, okay, I scan it and I send like $1, $2, whatever, and he got $1,000, and so people in the community posted that he reinvested this money and he bought a cooler and a fryer for making French fries. So there's the picture of Mario, super happy of having received his money in Bitcoin, because for all that he knows, he's receiving whatever he wants, Bitcoin or dollars, right? It just depends on him, but the people can send Bitcoin from far away. The other case that I tried to display this, I did it yesterday. There's like the Human Rights Foundation is accepting Bitcoin since 2014, but now recently Twitter implemented this little feature where one could click up there in the little cash button, and they can decide to donate, and they are connected with Strike. So whatever they receive, they could switch it immediately to dollars. But I don't need to know this. I just click there. I say I want to donate $1. They ask me to write a message. I copy the address, and I open my own Bitcoin wallet, and then I just click send. It asks me for scanning a QR code, but I click the paste on the clipboard, and then I just sent it, and just like that, I sent $1 in like 10 seconds to to Human Rights Foundation. We can try that with Swish, but it's not possible. And basically, no, I did it. Yeah. So, okay. In US, you can connect to the Lightning Network, right? But since I'm here and I don't have this access with Strike, because you will have to connect your Strike to your Twitter account, you won't be receiving the Bitcoin itself. You will, in this case, they receive dollars. Um, that's what I understand. But I'm able to put there my Bitcoin QR code. The difference is that if someone wants to send me, they will have to send me through the Bitcoin network, not the Lightning, right? And that will take fees, and it's a different process. Maybe more time to confirm, a couple of minutes, but that's still possible for everyone. So I mean, where to start? There's different apps. There's a degree of of custodialship here. You have Moon Wallet, which basically is self-custodial with some caveats, but essentially it means that you can receive Bitcoin and they will transform it into Lightning under the hood. You won't even notice, and then you can just interoperate with everyone on the Lightning network. And then you have Blue Wallet, which you can make a wallet of both Bitcoin or Lightning, and you have Wallet of Satoshi, which it was only Lightning, but now they also implemented this same feature like Moon, where you could have a static address and receive Lightning without having to generate an invoice every time. Or you can receive Bitcoin, but it will convert into Lightning, and you will just basically you will just operate with Lightning. And I'm not sure if you can do it here, but with Moon at least, you can scan either invoice. If it's Lightning or Bitcoin, you don't need to know, and it will just they will deal with that under the hood. And yeah, basically the takeaway is that the Lightning Network is basically a protocol on top of Bitcoin. Its value proposition is to have instant payments, low fees, so basically become scalable. And the challenge is that for this we need more number of users. So with number of users, it becomes more robust. With less users, it basically does not work. And yeah, this is my contact information. There's just to close it, a little QR code. If you want to find more news about Bitcoin, this is like a self-promotion. I run a little newsletter, and there you can find more information about what's happening every week. But go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering about the funding transaction. You said it's a 2-to-2 multi-sig.
Yes.
Does it mean then that if Alice puts up some funds to open a channel with Bob, and Bob is an asshole, or he dies maybe,
Yeah.
he decides to not sign it back for closure, Alice's money is then in a void and never recoverable. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes and no. So I mean, there's things how the technology works, which of course they thought about this, and they put some clause that if basically, let's go here and get a bit more deep, right? I might be wrong, but I'll try my best. But you remember this part, right? Where the states change. So basically what happens here is they have this signed transaction, but if coffee shop, let's say there's an asshole or not, but their node is down, then Alice will have to make a force close of the channel. And that will mean that she's signing, and coffee shop has some time to answer. If the coffee shop is not online on like 24 hours, I don't remember this number, but it's an amount of time, then it will be closed. It will be a bit more expensive because all the fees will be paid on Alice's side, but it will get closed and she will get her funds back. Yeah, I mean, it's like a transaction, right? Then there's another case, maybe you all are wondering, but imagine Alice move funds to Bob twice, and then the coffee shop logs out, unintentional, or even if the coffee shop doesn't do it, Alice could try to basically close a previous state where she had 600,000 instead of 200,000, and for this, I mean, there's an amount of time because it's a forced close, and that's why the amount of time is there, because if the coffee shop comes back and says like, hey, this is not true, and if they prove with the signatures this new state, which has the signature of the previous one, then the coffee shop could get all of the funds. So the incentive is to not cheat the system, right? And see.
Yeah. So someone has to pay for 2 transactions on the Bitcoin network, right? And if Alice chooses to close, then she pays both. But if then again Bob isn't an asshole and let's settle this down, do they share the cost or how does it work?
This is a good question. I am not sure, but
you can choose to prepay the outgoing. So let's say you put in 600,000 satoshis, then there is already, when you open the channel, maybe 1,000 satoshis reserved to close the channel and pay for that on-chain transaction when it's closed. And then in the contract, there's also, as you mentioned, this kind of time lock. So after a certain time, if someone is not online because they died or something, then it will auto-close. So keeping your node online is important. And as you also mentioned, one of the parties can try to close the channel with a previous agreed upon contract, because the Bitcoin network doesn't know how many times we have transacted back and forth. That's the way we increase the scaling.
So the way they communicate basically is you can find paths between each other, but the balances on each channel is not known by anyone, uh, but the two parties. They can know how much capacity it has, but they don't know where the funds are being placed. Yeah. Yeah. So the way I see it is basically they just basically like freeze some funds with a type of transaction that where the nodes are operating between each other. So it's just basically saying essentially what you're saying is like, hey, on my node, I will open this channel to this node. I know this is the path, and now my channel is public for everyone else to know that, hey, you can route through me if you want, but the funds are still under a signature that you own. So comes more into the definitions of what signatures are, and you guys could help me more if you have more deep understanding on this. Yes. Right. Just the same, just the same way you trust the Bitcoin network. Exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen, pizza is up, so apologies for
No, no.
interrupting, but can we give a big round of applause to Saúl on the Lightning Network?
Thank you.
Just before I let you all go, I should just mention that we have a after party arranged where you can also get access, or at least waiting list access, to a wallet that we're developing. It wasn't on one of the solutions that Saúl mentioned because it hasn't been developed yet, but that's at Plockapin. We're hoping to be able to wrap it up here at around about 7:30, and we're expected there at 8 o'clock. You are all welcome, and by all means, Michael will be providing some very cheesy music as well. But in the meantime, but in the meantime, we have some pizza, so please continue the conversation next door, and thank you all very much for coming along. Hope you enjoyed it. Cheers.